Well, in terms of polyolefins, we all know very well, in terms of feedstock, that the global supply and demand balance is strongly towards supply. So we are in oversupply right now, and in my presentation, this is what I will focus upon. So it's really important to understand our starting point. We are in the market right now. It's important to make strategic decisions, but those strategic decisions are based on the current market situation. So what is the situation right now? We are in a market which is strongly oversupplied because we have a lot of capacity that came online in periods when demand was not growing. If we think about the last 5 years, we had COVID, we had inflation. A lot of things impacted demand exactly in the same years when we were having... okay, thank you very much. Exactly when we were having a new wave of capacity. So when I was asked to present, actually, about the polyolefin market, I thought about a title, and I was asked to talk about polyolefins, so I thought that actually polyolefin market is at a breaking point was a good title. And we will see that strategic decision will be made, and I personally think that 2026, so next year, is really going to be a critical year for this industry. So very quickly, I'll present the current status of the market, the future development, so what is the ICIS view on the next 5 years, let's say. And then I'll focus on two challenges, let's say. One is the competitivity, and the second one is the sustainability of this market, which we have already heard something about this. I'll show you some data about regulations and what is the expectations. So the polyolefin market, we're talking about a market which is, if we take the two main polymers, so polyethylene and polypropylene, we're talking about almost 130 million tons globally for PE, 96 million tons for polypropylene. So we're talking about much more than 200 million tons on a global basis. This is 2025 data. And one thing I wanted to mention here is the percentage of Asia, the importance of Asia is 39% of the PE market globally, Northeast Asia. And if we put together Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, so the purple and the red part, we have 55% for PE. And for polypropylene, it is more than 60%. So actually, Asia is the key driver of the consumption of polyolefin on global basis. And how are these markets performing? So this is what I was trying to mention. I'm highlighting here in the square the recent years, and the blue bar is the incremental capacity, while the green bar is the incremental demand. So you can clearly see that we had a complete mismatch. While demand was going down because of COVID and things that we know very well, capacity was increasing. So we had a wave of capacity exactly when consumption was going down. And this is why, even if now you see recent years, 2024, 2025, incremental capacity and incremental demand are there, closer, but we still have a lot of capacity to be digested. Also, when I talk about Middle Eastern producers, North American producers, sometimes they ask, are we out of the woods? Are we going to get better next year? The answer is no, simply because the market status is really different now. We still have a lot of capacity to be digested in the market. For polyethylene, this is the example for polyethylene. We're talking about 30 million tons of new capacity in the last 5 years. So, of course, the dark line is operating rates, and operating rates are now falling from 87% 5 years ago to 81% right now. So, of course, the consequence is that producers struggle and the operating rates falls down. Now, future market development, what can we expect? Well, I'm highlighting the current 5-year period, so 2020-2025, and we had the impact on the demand, but then also talking about the future outlook, you can see our expectations is of, anyway, slowing down growth of consumption. We are talking about a market, polyolefin market, which is growing by 2.7% in the next 5 years. So it's still a decent growth if you think about other polymers doing much worse. Consider that the global GDP in the same period is around 2.6%. So polyolefin market is still expected to grow in line with the GDP on global basis. However, this is not comparable with what we had in the previous years. So what we have in the previous 5 years, you can see the growth were completely different. So demand is, anyway, slowing down. And what is going to happen on the capacity side? Well, unfortunately, the story is going to repeat itself. So we are, again, starting a phase of new capacity. You can see, again, blue bar is the incremental capacity, and now we're looking ahead. Look at the jump we have in 2026 and 2027. So global supply, oversupply is not finished, and actually things should get worse in the next years, 2026 and 2027. And we hear capacity rationalization in many regions, not only Europe, many regions, also China shutting down units. And of course, this is the reason why. And you can see the operating rates, 79% for polyolefin right now, this year, and 73% is our forecast in the next 5 years. It's 2028, yeah, so a few years from now. So, of course, we are in the middle of a new phase of new projects, mainly Asia and mainly China, but also Middle East. We heard about Amur GCC by Sibur in Russia. There are projects in North America, the Golden Triangle, Amiral, many projects in Middle East, Russia and North America still coming online, and China, of course, leading the increase. Next year, for polyethylene, we're talking about 35 new polyethylene projects in 2026. So really, really strong increases in capacity. So what happens now? I mean, I mentioned that the market is strongly oversupplied. So one of the consequences when a market is so oversupplied is competition. Competition increases. And I've taken the European example. Why Europe is struggling so much? Well, if we take polyethylene as an example and we look at the production cost, and here I'm looking at HDPE, for example. I'm taking one polymer, but just something similar is happening in the other grades of P. So this is the cost of production. So the first problem for Europe, the cost of production. Cost of production increases in this chart from left to right, and we have North America and Middle East, cheap feedstock, and we have Europe. You see where Europe is placed. And this is why production is falling. In the last 5 years, production in Europe declined by more than 10%. And operating rate is 71%. In North America, operating rate is 91%. So actually, first problem for the competitivity in Europe, operating costs, more than double that of North America and Middle East. Second problem, Europe needs to import more and more. Of course, you are declining the production. It means that you're going to fulfill the demand with import material. That's clear. But from where is this importing material coming from? And you can see the recent years' trend of increasing imports, but the majority of these imports are coming from, in the chart you can see the blue part and the green part, that's Middle East and North America. So exactly those regions where production costs were the lowest on global basis. So 39% this year of the market is covered with the imports. Imports coming from regions with the lowest production cost, which means cheaper cost, cheaper prices, cheaper material flowing into Europe. So this is the big challenge. And the third factor I would mention, the assets. In Europe, we have very, very old assets, which means, of course, more expenses. I mean, more cost, more capex, increased cost for the technology, for the maintenance, and cost of energy, of course, we already mentioned. But also on the sustainability side, you have more plants that are more polluting in the system. And so you can see in the chart here, polyethylene and polypropylene assets are the oldest we have on global basis, actually in Europe. So this is why we heard about, last week we heard about the closure of ExxonMobil cracker in Scotland. We had shutdowns from LyondellBasell, also selling the assets in Europe. Versalis shutting down plants in Ragusa in Italy. And of course, we have heard about capacity shutdown. And my expectation is that capacity rationalization will continue next year. We will go on, unfortunately, with capacity closures in the next years. And I hope I gave you a bit of a glimpse about why this is happening so much in Europe. And of course, global producers, they have assets in all the regions, and they can clearly see where there are the pain points and where they need to shut down the assets in order to get better margins for the following years. Now, a bit on sustainability, very quickly. We have a recycling team completely dedicated to this. I'm more on the virgin side, but of course I wanted to give you also a bit of a glimpse about some data we have on the sustainability side. This is the PPWR, very famous, but this is just, I'm not going through the details of this table, it's just a summary. I will share the slides. So slides will be made available to you so you can have all the details. But here what I want to mention is that all targets are very, very demanding. So this is really, really strong demand for recyclers in Europe. We're talking really about big changes and about new investments to take place in order to meet these targets. And for example, if we think about the food content for polyolefin, this is something that really needs to be built from scratch, let's say. And so if we try to translate this into what's going to happen, looking at the time scale, so the PPWR is in place right now. 2020 started in the beginning of this year. And what I wanted to stress with this slide is that there are secondary acts that will define all the details. So we're still waiting for these details. And these are not really minor things. These are key things. Like, let's focus on 2026. We are expecting more information on how to calculate the percentage, how to verify the percentage of the content that should be recycled. And also the second point with the green arrow, how to deal with imported material, imported recycled material. So these are informations that are key if you want to invest, if you want to build a new plant, if you want to really make an investment. So everything is on hold, like state, because we are waiting for the details. We're waiting to understand how to deal with this in the short term, because anyway, 2026 is next year. So we have done the math. We have done the calculations, and based on our data, let's focus on polyolefin. At the beginning, I'm putting also PET, but I want to focus on this presentation on polyolefins. So we are expecting that we will need for polypropylene and HDPE, so let's say rigids, we're talking about 4 million tons that we're going to need soon, by 2040. And 4 million tons also for the low-density part, so LDP and LLDP. So we're talking about big volumes we're going to need, and not even to mention the problem of the food contact part, which is still a big question mark for European recyclers. So we will need so much volumes, and what do we have right now? What is the current market status? In this chart, the blue part is not recycling. The blue part is the market. See, is the market size of Europe. And the green part is what we have now in terms of mechanical recycled output for polypropylene and HDPE, for example, the first part. The percentage is how much of the market is then met by recycled materials. So you can see it's only 8% for HDPE and TP, for example. So we are still, and if you think about the vertical axis, is around 1 million ton. So we are now at 1 million ton, and we need to reach 4 million ton by 2040. So still a way to go. So the message here is that really we need investments into this in order to meet the targets. On the other hand, as I mentioned, a lot of investments are on hold because we're still waiting for details. We're still waiting to understand how the things will work, how the calculations will be done. So how really to make an investment, but with all the data and all the knowledge that you need in order to do that in a certain way. And this is all I wanted to present to you today. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo.